Welcome to the Academic Woman Amplified podcast. I'm your host, Kathy Mazak, tenured full professor, mom of three, and firm believer that the culture of academia needs to change radically. Women are revolutionizing academia within institutions that were not built for us. If you're ready to reject the culture of overwork, kick guilt and overwhelm to the curb, and amplify your voice to make a real impact on your field without breaking down or burning out, you're in the right place. And it all starts with writing. Let's go. Hi, Gina.
Hi, Kathy. How are you?
I'm good. So full disclosure, podcast audience, Gina and I have already been talking for half an hour. So we're warmed up, ready to go.
Yes.
And today we are asking it's a little bit of like a baity question, which is, how many publications can you write in a year? And
that's such a good question.
Yeah. So let's dig into that question, because I think that's something that people ask themselves, right? Is like the how many number. So how would you coach people, Gina, who are asking themselves that question? Like, how many publications can I write in a year?
Ooh. So I think first you want to separate what you can do from what you think you should do. Because when we're getting expectations from other people, they don't know what we're capable of. And so probably at work, they're going to give us expectations that are way higher than what we know we can hit. And so when you're comparing that expectation, you want to think about, what am I able to do? What have I done in the past, for example? So I like taking what people have done in the past and just really thinking about it. So how many have you written in the past? That's kind of the first step.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to kind of jump on that idea of the should and where you're getting the should number from. Like, I think sometimes we get it from our institutions, right? Like sometimes our institutions will say, you need 3 peer-reviewed articles in this kind of journal in order to go up for promotion. However, most places don't say that. Most places, it's like you are divining from looking at what other people have done, how much is the number that you want to hit. And so that's really a messed up kind of way to set your number, because you don't know what the other people are doing. You actually don't know what the number that the tenure and promotion committee might be looking for. It's really hard. So I think going back to like what I can do and what I've done in the past is like kind of a great way to start with this question. And also, of course, the number is absolutely field dependent. So it's going to depend so much on your field, what kind of institution you're at, and all of those things obviously are part of trying to come up with a number. But I love looking at the past and going like, okay, what can I do?
Yeah. And I think that the other really important part of all of this, what can I do, is to be really honest about what the limitations are. I just spoke to a client who had broken her hand. Oh. And if you have some kind of physical limitation this year, this month, just today, you have to acknowledge that, because you're not going to be able to write the same amount now. I don't know if you have kids or, you own a house and you have to do all kinds of stuff, or you're taking care of someone. You're not going to be able to do the same amount when you're doing all of that you did when you were a grad student and you lived by yourself and you didn't have the same level of responsibilities.
Yeah.
So acknowledging what's going on around you is really important.
Yeah. And acknowledging different stages, right? Like, so what worked for you as a grad student often won't work for you as a professor. And not just because for me, when I was a grad student, I didn't have family responsibilities. There's other people who are working full-time jobs while they get their PhD and have their families already while they're studying. So it might not be as different, but it's still different. It's still like a different energy you bring to writing when you're a student than writing when you're an assistant professor or when you're an associate or beyond or whatever the titles are called in your place. So what if somebody looked out and they're like, okay, 2022, I want to write 3, 4, 5 things, get 3, 5, 4 things out, whatever the number is. And then they look back at 2021 and they go, oh, I did one thing in 2021. So where would you start? Like, again, like coaching somebody who we told them, like, look into the past for what do you need to do if you're going to up your number?
Ooh. Well, I mean, I think that one great way to start is by saying, okay, let's start with the one thing. You were able to do one thing last year. Let's start with that. You're going to surpass your last year's goals, and that's going to feel really good, something to celebrate. And then what I often like to do is if someone gets through a whole cycle of success of writing an article, then again, we're going to go back and we're going to take a look at how did they do that? How did they set it up? Was there really great planning, or did they have something that was motivating them? And then kind of try to replicate that as many times as possible. That's also what I like to do when I think about books or other big projects is the first time you have a success cycle, then try to replicate it. But of course, that all involves starting with that first step.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I love the idea of I remember I had a business coach who would always say this. She would be like, people have they do something successful in their business. And then they're like, now what should I do? And she was always like, do that again. You just don't make something new up. Just repeat that. So one of the things to think about, just to give people an idea, like some guiding questions on how was I successful before would be again, like what we've been talking about, what's the context? What's the context that I was successful, where I was successful in the past? How is it different from my context now? So is there something that needs to shift around context? How did it feel pulling off that publication last time versus how do I want it to feel now? So sometimes a lot of academics, and this I think comes from kind of the grad school culture in a lot of places, it's like a binge and bust kind of approach to publishing. And so you do a binge writing, where you're writing your tail off and you're working up to a deadline, or you're pushing really hard. And then you're so exhausted, there's this bust period where you don't touch writing for a really long time. So if that's how you were successful in the past, that might not be an acceptable way of doing things for you anymore, right? That is usually an unsustainable, or if not unsustainable, at least that's not going to help you get your numbers up if what you're trying to do is go from publishing 1 or 2 to 3 or 4 articles, because you can't do that binge and bust and maintain all the other stuff at the same time.
Yeah, it's sort of it is the difference between, I'm not even a runner, but I like using running metaphors. The difference between going out at a sprint and actually running at, full marathon or whatever. You have to hold on to that energy the whole time. And so if you throw everything into 3 writing sessions because you really want to get everything done, then you're probably going to lose 3 writing sessions later in terms of how tired you are and how zapped your brain is of ideas. So do you want to do that sort of mounted peaks and valleys, or do you want to just have a nice calm field of writing?
Yes. That's a sustained cross-country marathon journey. I don't know. Yeah. We're both not runners using running marathons.
Yeah, we're
running metaphors.
Okay.
Okay. So one of the things that Gina and I have been thinking about is how can we help people really support people who want to up their number of publications, increase the amount that they are writing to do that? What are the things that from a program perspective we can create and we can do to help support people to have a writing year the way they want it, that they want it to not feel binge and bust. They want it to not feel I did it once and I have no idea how to do it again, but rather that you get into more of a, sustained running kind of feeling instead of a sprint and stop and sprint and stop. Although we do use sprints because sometimes that can be helpful in infusing energy into projects. So one of the things that we decided to do was to take our signature program, which is our Navigate Your Writing Roadmap program, and expand it into a year-long experience. So when we are opening the doors for Navigate over Black Friday to Cyber Monday for enrollment. The program that's enrolling is a year-long program. So I want to talk about the kinds of things that are in that program that help people create that sustained writing, that sustained publishing, and that, sometimes it's like when we tell people to look back at last year, how many did you publish? If you don't change anything at all and you just replicate last year, that's the number of things you'll publish this year. There's no real reason to think that you're going to all of a sudden publish a ton more things unless you start to tweak your methods and change what you're actually doing. So I want to just kind of talk through some of the things that we have inside of our Navigate program, because some people who are listening might want to enroll, but also maybe these are things you just want to replicate for yourself, as you're thinking about 2022. So let's start with co-writing. Can you talk, Gina, a little bit about why we do co-writing and what's the experience of doing co-writing? What is it?
Oh, sure. So co-writing in our new post-COVID world is all virtual, as is pretty much everything else. And so basically we all jump on the same Zoom link. So we kind of create this virtual room. I usually use the gallery view, and it's so nice to see all of these other sort of floating heads working very hard, furrowing their brows. And I think that just in terms of the physical experience, that's just about it. You're at your computer, you're working. You might not actually see the people on Zoom because you've got your Word document up or whatever it is. But I think that it does three things that are really super useful. The first is that it's really inspiring. I mean, honestly, it sounds very silly, but to see other people looking really serious kind of brings you in. It's sort of a social thing. I must be looking serious too. And then also, I think that it offers a lot of resources. You just sort of feel when you're with other people, if you had a question, you could drop it in the chat. And there are all kinds of people who will drop questions in the chat or again, inspiration. And that's kind of the last part, is that you have this community that then you can talk to about just about anything. Obviously, while you're writing, you're probably not going to do a lot of talking, but just being there in that experience will then connect you to people that can be your resources and that can be your support for all of your writing. And I've noticed that a lot of people then kind of connect with other people as buddies, and then we'll meet up there, which is that kind of compassionate accountability where nobody's yelling at you for not being there, but you know that somebody is waiting for your beautiful face to show up on Zoom. So it makes you kind of want to be there.
Yeah. And also waiting to hear what your update is in the chat. So you might think so one of the things we talk about a lot over here on the podcast is sometimes we want accountability. We think we need accountability, and that our solution to that, or what we think you actually need, is community. But we love I love the idea of compassionate accountability, right? It's not somebody yelling at you to get it done. It's not like boot camp accountability. It's, it's heartfelt, and it's about genuine connection. And so when you get on the different, we run different times for those Zoom meetings where people get together, but also we have a link that's always open. So you can go there with your buddies or whatever. And you see people make progress. The same people will usually come at the same times. We ask people to put their goals for the session in the chat so you can follow people's progress. That, oh, Lauren's working on her book, and, Kathy is working on this article and whatever, because you are there with them every week or a couple of times a week. And so the story of other people's progress sustains you as well, and makes you want to go, because you want to find out where they are. And if you had a win, or maybe you need support, then telling them about it helps you. You want to show up to those writing meetings because you want to see what your pals are doing, and you want them to know what you're doing too. So you might think well, how are you creating community in a silent Zoom room? But it's true. We do that's what happens on those calls.
Yeah. And I think what we maybe forget sometimes is how isolating writing is in the first place.
Yeah.
And then again, in this world where we might not be able to sit in a beautiful library together studying, really what we need is just that connection, just that really simple, like somebody else is maybe struggling in the same way I am or reaching for a goal that's similar to mine. And then, it doesn't even take a ton of conversation. You don't need a whole night to connect to each other. You really just need to know that you're both working on the same things. And then that kind of creates that first sliver of community.
Yeah, absolutely. So to connect back to our theme of this podcast, which is how many publications in a year? And then the sub question is, what would need to happen to make, a change from how many you did last year to how many you do this year? One of the things that we offer in Navigate is this co-writing thing, which we have found to be really successful, that people have really had success with that. And it gives you just a little bit more of a reason to show up for yourself because there's other people there. So before we get along to the Navigate curriculum that I want to talk about as well, but I also really want to highlight the idea that we have now in Navigate, which is the weekly momentum mindset calls. So we're actually offering, as part of this year-long program, every Monday, there's a half an hour group coaching call. And maybe Gina, since you're the one who, since you do more of those than I do, you could talk about what happens on that call and what is the point? Why meet for half an hour with 50 people that you don't know, on Zoom for a group coaching call?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I have a lot of people who sort of misname it, and it's my favorite misname. They call it Monday motivation. Oh. And I think it's great. It describes it really well, because really what it is that opportunity to start the week right, to really set your intentions and to think about your writing, not just start your week as here's my to-do list. I'm just going to get through it and then do it all over again next week. You really want to kind of connect with why you love writing or what it is that you're good at. And so each week we have a different kind of thoughtful reflection that we want to start with. And then once we've had a little time to really think about our writing, we jump into breakout rooms. So you work with maybe 3 or 4 other people and you kind of collect wisdom, you share ideas, and most importantly, you reflect on what your writing is going to be like that week. And it's funny, I feel like there are a lot of logistical things that people want to fix about their writing, but so much of it is mindset. So much of it is how ready you are to sit down and face that page. Yeah. And so these kinds of things are really about that. People leave those meetings ready to do their 2 hours of writing, and it feels really good.
Yeah, I think that's a key thing in what you said there is a lot of times, and we're academics. And so we want things to be kind of logical, and we want proven results, and we want all of this kind of stuff that just tell me what to do in order to get this writing done and I'll do it. And maybe before you've read books or you've heard advice, it's write 500 words a day or do this or that thing that hasn't worked for you. And I think that writing 500 words a day could be a great way, to move your writing forward. But if you don't have the mindset piece in place, you're not going to be able to do that. So what mindset means, from the way we define mindset, is kind of the set of beliefs that you have around yourself. And in this case, your writing practice. Mindset is really about, how do I come to the work with beliefs about my success? How do I come to the work smushing down those voices in my head about, being an imposter, or about this person or the reviewer to critiques or whatever it is? Really getting your mind right in order to sit down and do the work. So we call it momentum mindset because we're trying, and that's the same, this idea of momentum is all about creating forward motion. And the more you do, and you do successfully, and you do in a way that feels good, the more you will continue to do. And so that's how you get momentum around things. It's you get your mindset right. So you're energized to sit down. You have a great writing session. We call them soaring sessions because soaring is the feeling that we want you to have. And inside of Navigate, we teach you how to manufacture that soaring because it does very often feel like a slog. And then that positive feedback loop will continue to kind of create a better and better relationship between you and your writing, instead of what lots of things do, which is they make you feel bad about your writing. And then you don't want to sit down and do it.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really good point. The feeling bad about your writing, because I think that there are two different ways we can try to motivate ourselves. There's the fear motivation, which is probably at least 75% of us do our writing because of fear, like a deadline's coming up or a co-author needs it, or this won't get published if I don't finish by this date. And yes, that fear is going to push you pretty hard, but you're going to run out of energy very quickly. And it's just not going to feel good, you know? But if you have some kind of forward motion that or something ahead of you that's pulling you, that's real motivation. And that's going to feel good. It's going to be sustainable. And yeah, you're going to finish your writing sessions, not just like sucked dry of energy, but maybe actually like having enjoyed them. And so I think that switch in terms of thinking about why you're writing. So having that positive why always there in your mind. These are the people I'm writing for. This is the message that I want to send out into the world, rather than just thinking of it as I have to finish this so I can move on to the next thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think Gina's really good at like digging into like, what are the different ways that you're motivated, and knowing that about yourself, which is something we also really stress in the programs, is that really knowing yourself and your practice is the most important thing. But like you said, like fear is not going to feel great. And so if you want to develop something that's really going to like keep going long term, you know, sometimes you're writing out of fear of the deadline. Like that happens to everybody at all stages, right? But sometimes, you know, like, could it just be really fun? You know, like, could it be joyful? Like, could it be like inspiring and exciting? You know, that's kind of what we want to go for. And it's super like you might be rolling your eyes as you're listening, but like, I'm like legitimately, that's what I want it to feel like for you. And so if we can even bring it like 70% towards joy, like that would, I think, probably be better than what most people are experiencing right now. Yeah.
Yeah. I always liked envisioning the face of the person who starts reading whatever it is and how their face lights up when they get to that first, like really big nugget of information or something. Like that's really what you want. You want that person to experience your writing. And if you can just sort of keep your mind on that, it feels much better than imagining the response of the editor when you're late.
So 100%. Or the reviewer when they're like tearing you apart. So yes, absolutely. All right. So I want to use the last few minutes of our podcast today to talk about the curriculum a little bit, and something that we've decided to add to our Navigate yearlong program, which are a set of 5 milestones. And I'll explain why we decided to do milestones and a little bit about each one. So basically, Navigate is a digital program. So there are 10 systems. Each system is a module, and inside of each module, there are several lessons. And we created these systems as the 10 systems you need to write and publish more. They start with some of the questions that we talked about, right? Like you're writing why. We write the mission statement. We really create like a central focus to your career, because one of the big complaints that we hear from people is I feel pulled in 1,000 directions. That's because you are actually doing too many things, not because you just perceive that you are. And so we want to give you a way to start to kind of pull everything you're doing around a central theme or a central mission, we call it, so that you can make great decisions about your time and that you don't feel that pulling. So the first like third of the modules or the systems are all about time and kind of culling away the things that don't fit, taking a really hard look at what you're doing, and then looking at how you can free up time. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention right now that if you go to kathymazak.com/sneak peek, you can get our freeing time module for free until November 23rd. So you still have time, go get it. And then you have until November 23rd to take advantage of that. And we would love to have you share that with some friends, because we really think that inside that module is, you might have heard me talk on the podcast before about Ideal Week. That's in that module. We talk about time-saving systems for students, for co-authors, for, meetings, for all these kinds of things. Because what we want to do is kind of like tighten all of that up and set some boundaries up so that you start to feel time abundance in your week instead of what so many of us feel, right? Which is there's not enough hours in the day. So that's part of the curriculum. And basically, if you think about the Navigate curriculum as a year long, for the first 10 weeks, you're doing those systems, you're doing those modules. Those weekly momentum mindset calls are happening every Monday. The co-writing sessions are happening. We encourage you actually to use the co-writing sessions to do the Navigate units at the beginning. And then we continue to support you to hit these 5 milestones throughout the year. So I'm going to tell you what the milestones are and why we decided to do them. So the first milestone is that you have 2 hours of writing blocked in your calendar and you honor those 2 hours. So the way that you do that is like at the beginning, we encourage you, like I just said, right, to use the Zoom co-writing times to actually kind of do more like co-working. So get on the Zoom. It's in your calendar. There's other people there. You're muted, so they can't hear what you're, like you're listening to the modules, and you use that time to complete the Navigate modules. That'll keep you on track. But that also puts that time on your calendar that you can then, honor as you go on. So by around week 6, 5 or 6 of the program, between doing this culling away and the freeing time and all this stuff and going to the co-writing meetings, we think that you will have at least 2 hours of writing time blocked in your calendar and you're showing up for those hours every week. So by week 5, that's there. So the first thing I want to say is think about last year. Did you write for 2 hours a week? If you want to make a change this year, one thing that you can do is like, okay, well, now you've got those 2 hours. We're not talking about every day. It's not 2 hours a day. It's 2 hours a week, right? But it's consistent and you're showing up. So that's milestone 1. And what we ask you to do for each milestone, and they're all set up inside of our course platform so that, you do a certain number of modules and then you hit a milestone. And what we're going to have you do is submit, whether you've hit the milestone or not, you're going to submit that to us using a form. And if you hit it, we're going to celebrate with you. We're going to say, great job. We might give away prizes, we might send you a note in the mail. We want to make you feel really great that you hit that milestone. And if you didn't hit it, we're going to ask you why. And then we will, reach out to you via email and say like, okay, here's the things we want you to try. We might make you a video and send it in an email. We might just kind of send you some things to start trying because we don't want anybody. We want to be able to troubleshoot as you go through the year. So that's something that we haven't done in Navigate before. And this is something like we don't believe in behind. We have a phrase in the program that's like, no one is behind. And also, if you don't hit a milestone, we want to know about it, not because we think you're behind, but we want to be able to support you in hitting that milestone. So we'll help you reset the milestone deadline and we'll give you some advice in terms of what was holding you back. So we really want you to hit all these milestones during the program. And we feel very confident that you will have all the tools that you need in order to make it happen. So the second milestone is that your pipeline is all mapped out. So by week 10, you'll have your individualized pipeline, which is something we teach in the course, mapped out with all of your projects on it. And that serves as like a project map for the year. So by week 10 of you being in the Navigate program, you have like your 2022 project map all mapped out. And you have 2 hours a week that you're working on it. So again, compare last year to that and see like how that might be able to create for you an experience where you actually are hitting these milestones and that there's more momentum really, right? And then I'm going to ask you, Gina, about milestone 3 is that you're going to submit a low-hanging fruit project for publication. So we're going to ask, the milestone is that you've submitted something. But right before that, the 2 weeks up until that milestone is our writing sprint. So could you talk a little bit about what the writing sprint is and like how it's organized?
Sure. So one of the more logistical things that we talk about in the Navigate program is creating almost like a ecosystem of writing. Neither of us are scientists, so we're using ecosystem.
We know we're not allowed to say ecosystem, but our humanities brains like to call it that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So you've got your consistent, possibly daily, but a few times a week writing. And that's kind of your bread and butter, right? That sustains you throughout the year. But then every once in a while, you really want to push through and feel just like that excitement of finishing something. And so that's what our sprints are. They're 2 weeks, no weekends. We keep our fingers crossed on that one. We hope that everyone is taking a little break on the weekends, but we have 2 weeks where it's almost like a little huddle. We get together, we plan out exactly what we're going to work on for those 2 weeks. We plan out when we're going to write, and then we let everybody know when we're going to be writing, and then we go and write, and then we share any wins that we have. We share struggles. We talk about different things that we could tweak a little bit to be better writers or to complete things during those 2 weeks. One of the really important things that we as coaches bring up is that you may have some kind of low-hanging fruit in your pipeline. I think of everyone that I've ever talked to, I don't think there have been many people who don't have a project that's just sitting somewhere waiting. Oh, it just needs that one thing, but I don't know. When am I going to do that? So those are often good projects to pull out and give you kind of a quick win. And if you need to spend more than 2 weeks on it, that's fine. But really, the idea is to choose something that should get out the door, that you want to get out the door, that you can get out the door, and then spend those 2 weeks just really pushing it through. And then, if you're able to submit something, just submit it. We're not worried about what happens after that because that's not under your control. But just submitting something, like, first of all, how great does that feel? And then second of all, then you get to, move on to another project. And then again, just to kind of like return to some of the ideas that we bring up in the program, we always want to feel like we're focusing on one thing at a time. And that's a really nice part about the sprint is that you get to really focus. And then if you don't want to think about that project anymore, you set it aside or you submit it and move on to something else.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, like you said, there is no one who doesn't have one of these projects. You probably have 3. Like most of the people come into the program, they're like, actually, I've got like 3 or 4 of those. So we work with you to help you figure out. We do like a kickoff call for the sprint and we talk about how to organize yourself and everything. And so by that 3rd milestone in the program, you should be submitting something for publication. So think about last year, think about what you've done before, think about what you want to do, and you can start to see how doing this program increases what you can do. Right? Like, so we talked about what you should do versus what you can do in terms of number of publications a year. So with the amount of support and the structure, then we're starting to say, okay, we're going to expand capacity. Like we're going to take what we did last year and we're going to build on it so that we can do more, not just that we should do more. And sitting around with the feeling that you should do more all the time sucks. So that's why we're like, let's take action and part of what Gina and I really were thinking about with the milestones and with making Navigate a Year is like, what does it take? Like, what does it take to actually hit those goals? What does support look like that we know is going to be effective for people? So just to wrap up, the last 2 milestones 4 and 5, and they're like kind of spaced equally throughout the year. So they're 5 milestones throughout the year. The milestones 4 and 5 are all about creating your own milestone. So basically, we didn't want to tell people you should submit articles because what if you're in a book field and that doesn't matter to you? Or what if you're a historian? My historians are my favorites. Their articles are like 30 pages long. They take forever. Like you're not going to submit 2 articles in a year, probably. And plus you're working on your book and whatever. So we wanted to make sure that part of the teaching is very sustainable. It's not just in Navigate like, okay, we want everybody to submit 3 articles this year. No, we feel like you need to be able, and you will, by the time you finish all the Navigate modules and you have your writing time blocked out, you have your pipeline mapped out, and you've had this win from the low-hanging fruit, you are ready to set your own milestone. And that's something that you need to do forever. when your year in Navigate is over, you're going to continue to need to be able to set milestones for yourself, right? So we're going to teach you how to do it. We're adding modules to our Navigate program, or a module that is going to be about that milestone setting. But we're calling it setting a milestone because we want to think of them as program milestones. But really what we're drawing on is the things you've already learned in Navigate, which is how to think about your writing goals, what types of writing goals are for you, how to have a pipeline that's a pipeline, not a funnel, right? That's not like overloaded with stuff. So by the time you get to milestones 4 and 5, you have all the skills to set your own milestone. We're just like putting it together for you and giving you some ways to think about it. So just as examples of what milestones could be, of course, they could be an article. It could be a chapter. It could be even just like a book review or some other smaller publication, but that's important for you depending on where you are in your career. It could be part of a grant proposal, a fellowship proposal, an internal sabbatical proposal. Like it could be whatever is meaningful and is going to be career propelling, for you. We teach you how to do them. And again, for each of these milestones, we ask you, did you hit your milestone? Why or why not? And then we are able as coaches to respond to you and push you and cheer for you and be excited for you. And then also give you some direction, like, okay. And actually, I think by the time you get to milestones 4 and 5, you're going to be able to start diagnosing, which is exactly what we want, self-diagnosing what happened, so I'm sure that some of those milestone reports will be like, I didn't hit it. I know why. Here's what I have to do. And then we just are going to say, yes, you go, you do it, because that's what we want. We don't want you to need us to tell you things all of the time. Like you're learning how to do this for yourself. So that milestone check-in, I think, is going to be a real enhancement to the program. And it's also going to help us measure how well we're doing and see maybe there's things we need to add to this program or things we need to take out, that are confusing people so that we can have, those best results for everyone. So we went longer than I was expecting, Gina. I'm sorry to keep you. Do you want to say anything else before we sign off today?
Yeah, actually, I was just going to go back to the idea of this being a full year program. And one of the things that I think I'm most excited about the full year, and that's that during the year, your ability to do anything ebbs and flows. And so even thinking about that first milestone, like setting aside 2 hours of writing, that might go great for 3 months. And then it falls apart for the 4th month. Yep. And then one of the things that this full year program is going to teach you is, oh, okay, that was a month and it didn't work out. Let's try it again. And then just sort of getting back on the horse, or whatever metaphor I'm going to use. And having a whole year to do that really teaches you not just how to do it, but how to do it regularly and how to fix problems and how to be sustainable about it. So I'm super excited about that because we're going to see a lot of growth with people with a full year program.
100%. There's no moment where everything is fixed, or there may be a moment that everything's fixed, and then there will be a moment where everything is not fixed again. You know what I mean? Yeah. But the point, and that what we really want people to do, is you have the tools. We want to give you the tools and help you develop those tools that when you have to intentionally or unintentionally park your writing because something else is going on because you're a human living a life, then how to get back into it. And hopefully without all that guilt and shame and yuckiness that a lot of times we kind of put on ourselves, why can't I get this done? No, all of that we are chucking to the curb, and we are replacing it with understanding what you can do, thinking about that in context, thinking about ebbs and flows, and adapting and changing and knowing, having confidence and trust in yourself that you will get back on the horse or start running on the trail or whatever metaphor we're going to use for that. So I love that. All right. Thank you, Gina.
Thank you, Kathy. It was great talking to you.
Yes. And listeners, I will just say one more time that if you want to get the access to the freeing time module of Navigate, you can get access for absolutely free. Just go to kathymazak.com/sneak peek. You have access until I think November 23rd. And then we're closing that as we are enrolling the program from Black Friday to Cyber Monday. But if you sign up for the sneak peek, then you get a little bonus. You get first crack at joining the program. And the reason you want first crack at joining the program is that the first 15 people to enroll get to come to our 3-day virtual retreat at the end of January. So it's a great retreat. We bring in a guest speaker. We send you a beautiful box in the mail so that it feels retreaty to you. And let's just say that over the course of all of this time, we've gotten real good at virtual retreats. It doesn't feel like just like a Zoom meeting. So it's a retreat that we put on for our Amplify and Elevate clients. But the first 15 people to enroll in Navigate will get to go as well. And you can be one of those first 15 people by signing up for the sneak peek, because we're going to open the doors to you all first. So that's it. Thank you so much, Gina.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Okay, bye. Thank you so much for spending your valuable time loving on yourself and your writing by listening to this episode. If you're feeling pulled in 1,000 directions and can't seem to carve out time to write, I've got a solution for you. Go grab my 10 ways to make time to write cheat sheet. Just go to kathymazak.com/podcast-time to learn my best quick tips for putting writing at the center of your career where it belongs. We'll link that up in the show notes. Just go to kathymazak.com/podcast-time.